Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening to another episode of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. As always, I'm very pleased to have you with us this afternoon. If you're watching live, it's Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. This show is carried at other times during the week, so but if it's Tuesday at 6 p.m. you're watching live, the call-in number for this show is, of course, area code 603. It is 640-3091. We'd be happy to take your calls. So this being the time of year that it is, and it's a little quieter than usual on the education side, and as you know, my kids play soccer and lots of other sports. Soccer is close to my heart, so I'm very honoured and pleased to have two gentlemen with me tonight who I've grown to know over actually many years now. They're here from England, and I'm delighted to have them. They're part of the British Are Coming soccer camp here in Manchester, and they've agreed with some trepidation to come on here tonight, and we're going to talk about a little bit of education, a little bit of England, a little bit about soccer, and a little bit about the US-UK, or as we call it, USOC. And that's not a rude word, it's US-UK, because we have our little competition. So we're going to talk about those things, but I think first of all, let me introduce them quickly. On our right, we have Chris Whitehouse, who's here. Welcome, Chris.
Jim, thanks for inviting me.
And then, of course, next to him in the wrong colours is Davy Lee, because anybody who's he's also from Newcastle. Hi, Davy. How are you?
Jim, very good.
Good to have you here. So usually, see, if you're up in the part of the world he's from in Newcastle, he's wearing Sunderland colours. So that's.
I mean, in fairness,
yeah,
Sunderland's red and white. So I've got red and black.
Okay.
It's actually the Quarrymen's colours, the football team I play for back home, so we're okay.
All right, he's okay. You let him off. So I'll tell you, we got a short piece of video that I just want to run for you. It's about less than a minute, but it's taken from camp here in Manchester, the soccer camp at Livingston Park called The British Are Coming, and it's a little snippet of some of the fun and games that happens. We're talking about the manager of the Newcastle United soccer team, Rafa Benitez, and here it is.
On your feet, on your feet. Loud and clear so Rafa can hear. 1, 2, 3. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez. Philip Copley. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez. Give yourselves a round of applause. Well done.
So, there you go. You'll be thankful to know that Davy Lee is a better soccer player than he is a singer, because we wouldn't pay him to come over and do just that. But the British Are Coming soccer camp has been going on for 26 years here in the city of Manchester, and I've been very pleased and honoured to be involved in it in the last decade and a half or so. But let's talk about how you. Let's say you, Chris. You were part of the original generation.
I was part of the originals. Yeah, it all started back for me in 1994. A guy called Graham Hesketh, who's a lecturer at our college.
Yeah.
He invited a group of us over from Bedford College. We were all at university, and we were all soccer players and all teacher trainers. We were all trained at BP teachers, sports teachers. Right. So Graham came to us and asked, guys, do you fancy coming to coach in America? And what an opportunity we thought that could be. So yes, of course we came, and we arrived in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire. We hooked up with Donald Bisson and Catherine Scalingi, who then distributed us out into families. So we became part of the community straight away. And then we began our coaching program, and it's a 2-week program. And because of the community aspect of it, we built these relationships over the years. We kept coming back. It grew bigger. More Brits came over. Right. More Americans got involved, like yourself, Jim. And
dragged in screaming.
Dragged in, kicking, screaming. And it escalated into a generational thing almost. If we started from ours, we've moved on to Davies, and now we've moved on to younger generations even still. So
Davey then, that's great. So Dave, I can't call him Dave because it's Davey. So Davey, you've been doing, this is your 10th year coming
10 years,
here?
Yeah.
So what was your entree to it? How did you get involved?
Chris was my mentor when I was learning to teach.
So we blame him for any of your
My
faults.
fault.
Right. You take full responsibility,
Yeah,
but none of the blame.
We're sitting one day, so 2009, sitting one day, and he goes, "Do you want me to change your life?" And I went, "Yeah, I'd love you to change my life. What have you got?" He goes, "I'm going to take you to America if you want to come." I was like, yeah. I said, he didn't tell me much about it. He said, "We're going to go to America, we're going to go to this great place, meet these great people," and wow, it's developed from there, and what a place, and what a great camp it is, and forged so many relationships, and a great community program, which is, engages so many people, children and adults, and it's a privilege to be part of.
In any society, right, in any city, and Manchester's not a very big city, but, it's the biggest one in New Hampshire. But, there are people watching us who will know little about it. They may have heard, if they're a regular watcher of this program, they'll know I mention it as we get closer and closer to the August time period. But just so for those who are not familiar with it, in the city of Manchester, the local soccer leagues, there's a Manchester North, South, East and West, and Manchester North plays its games out of Livingston Park. But what's unique in the North End is that we have this summer camp that we run called the British Are Coming Soccer Camp, and these two gentlemen are part of it. And so every year, and it's on right now, every day, if you want to watch some kids having fun, they teach them more than just singing. So so they do soccer, and it's from 5 to 15 years old, and then the history, right? The guys who came with you, Chris, right?
Yeah.
Like the current coach a teacher at Bedford High School, and the coach of Bedford High School soccer team, and a very successful one. He came with you originally, right? And he's lived here now for many years.
That's correct. Yeah, Stu Pepper, another guy, Andy Colton.
Oh yeah, he's in Goffstown. Yeah.
So I mean, we're all a certain age now, shall we say?
Right.
But these guys, developed relationships with the Americans, enjoyed the culture, the lifestyle, and they progressed into actually meeting Americans and becoming settled in America. Right. So the whole thing has developed into transatlantic relations.
So, and the whole thing, of course, goes back to one man in particular. Now his head's big enough already, and he might even be watching us. So we don't want to give him too much praise. But in the end, there's one guy who the guy you mentioned, right, who invited you in the very beginning, Graham Heskett, or Heskey to us. And he was the guy whose vision it was, who started it, and amazingly, he's been leading it for now 26 years. So when he was, so can you explain again? He was teaching you in.
So he lectured down in Bedford, but we were all at the university in Bedfordshire, and we actually had a Sunday team. A lot of the guys who played on a Saturday or played for the university played for the Sunday team as well, and through that, Graham was the manager of this team, and he was poaching all us good players, if you like. Yeah, because
I've heard of that.
Okay, so he's poaching us, and that's when that's when we all met him, really, through college and through the team, and that's when we all sort of got together and moved.
So what do you think about the difference in between soccer in the US and soccer in the UK? And I'm talking about kids now, right? Like we're not going to we can talk about the World Cup in a minute if you want, because I think it's probably the first time in 30 years that an English guy wants to talk about the World Cup, at least from 92 on until this year, where England was remarkable. But so what do you think? You've seen now for a long number. You 10 years and you're 20 some years. What do you think about how soccer might have changed in the US? Do you have your opinion about that, or the kids? Are there more kids playing? Are they better? Do you think? Is there a greater interest in when you came first? Or
from my point of view, I think there's far more interest in soccer, or football as we'd call it.
Yeah, football. Right.
Amongst the youth or the younger generations now. Back in the early 90s, I mean, the cusp of late 70s when Pele and Georgie Best and co came over and played in what we would call the MSL now.
Right.
That had died, and so US soccer wasn't as popular, I don't think. But we found that the kids enjoyed playing it more than, as much as they would enjoy baseball or basketball or American football. So they were getting so much enjoyment out of it, we sort of thought we can deliver something here.
Right.
And maybe it wasn't as big then, but now they're more aware of British teams, European teams.
Right.
The US team have done well over the last decade or so.
Right.
So soccer now, I believe it's become, not quite on par with the bigger traditional American sports, but it's there.
Well, we see it now because it's on mainstream television. Like when I came here first 25 years ago, you couldn't watch the Premier League on TV. It wasn't there. Dave, what about you and girls in soccer? What do you think about? I always think, and I don't know. Like I'm asking you, it's not my preconceived ideas, but people have told me in the past that sort of that girls soccer, that the number of girls or the level of interest in soccer from girls in the US is higher than it is in the UK. Is that true? Do you think?
Well, in England, if you think about US soccer, certainly as I was growing up, US soccer was infamous with the women's team, and the women's leagues were actually seen as a better standard and better quality than the men's leagues, which is quite a strange mindset in terms of that stereotypical thought process. Now, my sister played professionally in England, so she has a really she's had a very fortunate experience in terms of soccer in England, and America has become bigger and bigger and bigger, and she's had the privilege to come over here and play for a little bit and try it out and coach and do camps. So she's seen it progress from a professional point of view, and always talks about actually how girls seem to really enjoy the sport. It's a big team game, forging relationships and really positive atmosphere, but more and more clubs and community clubs that you have in your areas are picking it up alongside baseball and many other different sports for girls and also the boys. So it's massive now.
And in English, the women's soccer in England, like women's football, I think, are they number like 3 or 4 in the world or something now? Like they've come on like, gangbusters in recent years.
And it's because obviously the money very much is directed towards the men's game. Right. But the FA in England are pouring more and more into the female game. Right. There's the women's England team's done very, very well over the last few years. They've got Philip Neville, who's managing Manchester United in there.
We won't hold that against him.
Well, and he's in there now, and they're training out of St George's Park, and there's a lot more emphasis on developing the women's game, not just on a national level, but also domestically. They've changed the league formats, so more money can be put in, maybe to a smaller number of teams at the top level, but hopefully that'll develop in major cities.
There was quite a bit of controversy here last year, because when it was discovered how much the US women's national team players were being paid, and I forget the numbers because, not that it matters, it just was a fraction of what the men's team was being paid. The men, got beaten by like Trinidad and Tobago, a country, forgive me, like with 25 people in it, but I mean it's just a small place, right? So the U.S. men's national team gets beaten by small Caribbean nations and doesn't make the World Cup finals. The contrast was the U.S. women's national team is either 1 or 2 for the last 3 World Cups, and to find out that they were getting paid. So I don't know how that was going to be resolved, but that is changing because there's money going towards that. Let's talk about the for a minute. Let's talk about. I want to touch. I have to go to the England and the World Cup for a minute because I wasn't going to, but I want to touch off for a minute because I don't know if this is true or not, right? But it seemed to me almost like a sore subject in recent years. I think if I had been, most people or some people may know, I lived in England and a couple of times in my earlier life, and I would have been I'm not faulting the individual guys. They're probably all good guys, but so we don't know. I don't want to blame anybody, managers or the people. Not because I don't want to. It's just I don't know where the blame lies. Right? It's easy to pick on a Rooney or someone, and doesn't perform under the lights and all that stuff. But let's forget about all that. That was the fact, right? U.S. coming home, without honor almost. Maybe that's too strong. But this team, right? Like you guys, how exciting was it to be in England for the last month?
What do you think, Jim?
I saw some of that. I'll tell you, it was places I wanted to be. I watched it on, I watched it on TV, and they would show back like some square, like Times Square, or people up at the Cop in Liverpool or whatever. And I think they even had Newcastle there. So it must have been wild, right?
It was fantastic. I can understand some people, maybe from an argument could be we got quite an easy passageway through to the semi-finals, but the truth is we did what we had to do, and that just creates the snowball effect, if you like, and the excitement and the support behind the team from the whole. It's coming home.
Yeah. And you mentioned Rooney, and I think you go back to what was seen as the golden period
Right.
where you had the likes
Right.
of Rooney and you had Steven Gerrard and you had all these great.
When
great
I think about the
footballers.
Lineker guys and Beckham
Yeah, you go
and
back
that
further.
whole, yeah,
Beckham and
right,
Beckham.
obviously Beckham
Shearer,
and Rooney
Alan
over
Shearer.
here now.
Yeah.
Alan Shearer and other great Newcastle players
Right,
as well.
right,
Not that
yeah.
I'm biased, but we came to this World Cup and actually no one really expected us to do anything. It was
Right,
a young
right.
crop of players. And I
New
think
manager, young manager.
A very young manager who put his stamp, I think, on it very early on with
And
the choice of players and leaving Wilshere home, leaving
Yeah.
out Rooney.
And I think everyone thought, well, we'll just give it a go. If we get out of the group, let's just see what happens. Which was great because at home everyone was quite grounded.
Right.
And then
For
all
once.
of a sudden,
For once.
yeah, all of
Yeah.
a sudden you got this sort of tidal wave of a progression through the group stage, and then there was a belief, oh, we'll go a little bit further, and then we pushed on, and we take on Colombia, win on penalties,
Right.
and all of a sudden all these hoodoos are starting to go, and all of a sudden in the country, everyone's united at a time where actually the country's quite divided.
Right,
But,
right, yes.
through a waistcoat, through a manager that was an unknown quantity,
Yeah.
who wore a waistcoat, all of a sudden everyone in England's wearing a waistcoat, and everyone's singing, everyone's cheering, communities are coming out, everyone's watching the game together.
We had the youngest squad in the World Cup, I think.
Right.
And
He was the second, or sorry, but it was
second,
almost the youngest. Yeah.
And
yeah.
Dave's right. Before the tournament, we just said, don't embarrass yourselves,
Right.
guys. Just give it your best. We're,
Right.
we're behind you. We're obviously
Yeah,
going to watch
yeah.
the games and support. And in the first game, we played some decent stuff in the first half, but I think a kickstart. You might agree with me, Dave. A kick-started the tournament for us when we scored 5 goals in the first half
Right.
against
Yeah,
Panama,
yeah, yeah.
and we played some fantastic stuff, open, flowing, fast
I
football.
loved it.
But even
I
though-
loved it.
And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, the snowball effect. And then Davey mentioned the penalties. Your viewers might not know, but England have never won a penalty shootout in
Right.
the World Cup. So it's a
Which of course is an awful way to
Huge
decide
chip
any
off the
game,
shoulder,
but
yeah.
but it is a part of the game, and
and then we won and
Yeah.
go through the knock, and
Right.
But even the
everyone's-
first game, when we played in Tunisia, and it's 1-1,
Yeah.
and actually an England team maybe of old, even the golden generation, would have limped through to a 1-1 draw.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you would have been like, oh, well,
Here we go again.
but we're going to win it.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a buzz. Then you go and play Panama and start scoring goals for fun in the first half, and everyone's all of a sudden like, wow, let's
well,
go
when,
and see
when
what
you see people like I mean, I don't know why just the first name comes to mind, not because I was thinking about he's the one guy, but like I think about people like Harry Maguire, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the comparison between those players, with all due respects to Harry Maguire, right? He's not Neymar, he's not,
No.
you know what I mean? He's
Mm-hmm.
not Messi. And he's not Mo Salah, right? So players that were not that they weren't, they're obviously good players, and Maguire was. People are looking to pull him out of Leicester now as a result. But you had so many players who were playing against on paper, better team,
Yeah,
better squads.
individuals, yeah.
What I loved was the style,
Yeah.
that they went and they actually went after the game. So I loved it all. So anyway, it was a great week or two.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
fantastic!
sadly and crucially, you said the style.
Right.
The moment we stopped playing the style was the second half against Croatia.
Right. Well, part of that is legs too, right?
Yeah,
like
partly
they're a
legs.
young squad
Yeah.
too. It's a long season. We hear that, and Germany has a different way of doing. But in any case, you still have. I think it's legs, and I also think it's maturity and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And taking nothing away from Croatia, that was a great side.
Very good side.
They were good. But the other thing is, it reminded me of Liverpool this season, where when the European Cup, if you can't put the ball in the back of the net when you're going strong in the first 45 minutes,
Yeah.
you had your
Yeah,
couple of
yeah,
shots.
yeah.
Not blaming anybody, but you got to take them.
Harry had to take his chances.
Yes,
we all know
yes,
that.
Yeah.
And that 2-0 at half time is a different ball game. So you're thinking
Completely
we're-
different.
We're
yeah,
going
yeah.
through here.
Yeah. So
1-0, just hanging on.
But how excited is it like heading into the European Cup now? And like you see these players all have legs. And I felt bad. I tell you, right at the last, in that game, the last game they played, I was thinking about Oxley Chamberlain.
Yeah.
And how sad it was for him to because he would have made a
It
difference.
would have been slight. Yeah, I think
on
it would.
that side, a Wilshere fully whatever, but taking nothing away from the midfield that was there, and I think a lot of people matured and did well, and so
No.
I'm excited. I think it's an exciting time. Let me swing into kids. So I hope, I think maybe that excitement translates into kids wanting
Yeah.
to go outside and play the game. You think?
It's the World Cup. Children watch it and they get excited by it, and of course, when your nation does well,
Right.
It creates that further, buzz amongst kids that go out and play in the street. Same as tennis, Wimbledon's on,
Right,
and all of a
right.
sudden we have so many people going to tennis courts and playing tennis for that small period of time. So,
Right.
if it's out there in the public domain, it can only have a positive impact.
Right.
The danger is that once time progresses,
Right.
the excitement and the participation levels do dip again.
Right.
When England won the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, the RFU put a lot of money into playing rugby union,
Right.
and the participation levels of the
Well,
younger generation, huge increase.
And
So we've got to
but-
take advantage of this. The FA have got to take advantage.
And I'm not as up with it as maybe you are, but things have changed with the FA and stuff, right? I mean, they're now money is being spent on producing younger players down through with academies and things in England,
And
right?
that's been going on for a period of time. And actually, if you go down the youth teams in the national setup,
Right.
England's
15,
actually been
U17,
they've
right.
been successful. They've won world championships, they've won European championships in the last few years.
Right.
And so it's happening at the under-19s, it's happening at the under-18s, it's happening at the 17s, and they're only going to come through.
And that's where it's all at. Kids learn the love of the game, which is when I was at Manchester North Soccer League, my first and foremost thing, like my mantra all the time was, it'd be nice to teach kids more skills, and the first thing we want to teach them, there's little toddlers coming in there, the first thing we want to teach them is love of the game. We want them to come back next
You
year.
wanna
That's the
enjoy
first
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Like some coach shouting at the kids, or sort of, or more like most coaches are volunteers, they try hard, but it's easy to fall into coaching the top 10%,
Yeah,
top
yeah.
20%, and we learned, and I bow to your guys, you have more experience than I do, but on any, like in a team of 10 players and whatever it is, right? I know it's 11 for the full squad, but in smaller groups we have 8s and 10s and even 6s. But in a team of 10, of say U12 players or U8 or U10s, 3 or 4 players get all the touches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then 2 or 3 players get some touches, and then there's 2 or 3 players don't get any. And you could at the end of their season, you know who's coming back next year and who's not.
Yeah.
So what I love about the opportunity at the British are Coming Soccer Camp that you guys have been coming to do for all these years is that it's inclusive. It's for everybody. So the kids who have
Yeah.
a lot of skills, etc. So so let me talk about another subject, which is connected to that, which has to do with. I wish I had with me. I could spend some time and jump online and Google it or something. But there's a significant problem with child obesity in the United States. I presume it's something similar in the UK because it's born of kids sitting around on games and all the rest of it. Is it? Do you know? What? I'm sorry to jump around. What are you doing right now as a job? Do you teach or are you doing PE?
Yeah, I'm still teaching
PE?
sport in the school. Yeah.
Right. And Davey, you were teaching.
So I do my main subject's history. Do a little
Okay.
bit of sport and special ed as well. So.
Okay. So, like, what do you see as a PE teacher? Kids coming in through whatever grades they are. I mean, are kids less fit or more fit than they were before? Is it?
Personally, I think slightly less fit. I think the similar problem to the US is
Right.
just creeping into the British society, and it is the gaming, it's sitting around, it's the opportunity to do nothing, sedentary lifestyles for children, which is crazy, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, from a PE aspect or an educational aspect, pupils in our education system are required to do 2 hours a week.
Right.
2 hours of PE, okay,
Per
so
week.
per week.
Wow.
So by the time they've got changed, etc., those 2 hours have reduced, and
Right.
the activity they do within those 2 hours isn't always intense. So
Right.
the majority of their lives, if they choose to, they're not going to do anything if they
Right.
choose to, which is the
And
worry.
so, is this across like all schools? That's like a national
I think
thing.
it's just creeping into society within, that's within the schools. But we obviously have your pupils that are interested in sport, and that's where the extracurricular and extra teams, the
Right.
after-school teams, etc., become so important. because that's the extra time and extra hours that these kids are going to get
So,
doing
like,
something active.
in the high schools in America, especially now in Manchester, we have had a deficiency at the middle school level. So that's sort of 6, 7, and 8 grades. So roughly 12 to 14, each kind of age group. There are some sports there, like organised sports that are organised, so they're free for people to play because they're organised for the school. Now these sports are played after school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a PE period in the day or on some of the days, depending on which grade you're in, etc. But I'm talking about after-school programs that are run by the school, and is organised by the schools, right? So they're, they play intramural or whatever between the schools, etc., or they play in leagues. There's been a challenge in Manchester, and in fairness, the Dr. Vargas, the superintendent who's been here for the last year and a half or so, under his leadership, and Joyce Craig, our new mayor's leadership, there has been some movement to bring back some sports in middle schools, and we can only hope that continues. But so in our high schools, there are multiple sports opportunities for kids in each, and without costing them anything. Is that how it would be in a high school in England? If I was at a high school in Leeds, I mentioned Leeds for a reason. That's for you, Heskey. Little shout out to Leeds United. Nobody's ever heard of them, but anyway.
There are opportunities, but I think that it's a double-edged sword. For schools in England, there's from the top in terms of the government, there's different ideas and different agendas, and actually at a time where PE is actually being pushed to one side to help these new reformed subjects in English and maths and things like that.
Right.
The time's becoming less for kids.
Right. Let me just, we have a caller coming in. Caller, go ahead. Are you ready? Are you there? Did I lose you?
Yes, nope, she's there. Go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
Try it again.
Hello? Oh, well, maybe I'm on this one. Hi, caller, go ahead. Hello?
Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
I'm watching your program, and it's interesting. This is Sandy Paradise, a former school board member of 14 years.
Hi, Sandy, how are
I
you?
just wanted to mention my daughter, who is 50, my oldest daughter, who is 54, she'll be 55. She taught all grades, but she was an exchange student over in Bath, England. This
Beautiful
was
place.
in 1983.
Wow.
She found it very interesting. She was teaching first and second grade over there. But she found it interesting that there were a lot of sheep on the front lawn. But it was very, very interesting for her. Anyway, she had to write a thesis when she came back. And she did get a very good mark on it, I noticed. But
Good for her.
she said, one of the things, Mom, she said that they did is, in the morning, before classes started, they would do 10 minutes of PE. They would take off their shoes and their jackets, and sometimes they would just have literally their underwear on, or a little slip-on underwear and panties or whatever, and they would do PE with the teacher in the classroom. She
Wow.
said, that's what I was taught, she said.
In
It was quite
1983?
interesting.
All right.
One of the classes that she had taught. And
Okay.
she said that got their brains moving and got them moving, and
All right,
that's
well,
how she did used to run, and she was a cheerleader for many years for our church and for our school.
good. Well, Sandy, I'm
Still
going to...
walks all the time.
All right, Sandy,
We
I'm...
don't have anybody obese in our family,
Right.
thank
Good,
gosh.
good.
But
I wish we
a lot
could-
of us walk
Right.
and run and do some form of exercise and try to eat
Eat
well,
right as well.
not
All right, Sandy, I'm going to let you go. I wish I could say that...
Anyway,
there-
I thought that was interesting. That was
All right.
one part of the thesis that she wrote
Thank you.
when she came back. She
All
had to
right.
write a thesis because
All
she had a Bachelor of Science in Education, a minor in business, and a minor in English.
All right, Sandy, I'm going to let you go because we're going to talk about this, what happened there. Thanks. Thank you. All right, that's Sandy, who was a former school board member here in Manchester. So I don't know if you ever have kids, doing PE for 10 minutes in the morning, but
What we do, Jim and Sandy, because we're trying to get so much time or opportunity for these kids to do different sports throughout the working day.
Right.
We will have clubs before school, so 8 o'clock you'll have table tennis club, badminton club, anything we can do or put on just to give extra time for these kids and extra opportunities.
Right.
So they are still, Sandy, doing a little bit when they choose to.
I mean, and I've read pieces on this thing about physical movement. Now, it's separate from PE and etc. Just physical movement. That like having like a 12-year-old in a classroom, going into a classroom, sitting at a table. Here we start school earlier than in the UK or in England generally. So sitting at a desk by 7:40 and sitting there till 10:30, 11 o'clock.
It's tough.
It is. I mean, us adults wouldn't want to do it, right? Well, late night maybe. So, all right. So that's that. So let's talk about. I want to go back to USUC, and if you weren't listening earlier on, that's US UK. So every year we've had this wonderful tradition of the English coaches, and there's about how many of you are here this year? About 20 or so.
So there'll be about 20 all in.
Yeah.
And that includes counsellors, who are the younger ones. So
bringing on the next.
bringing on the next generation.
Right. And when I was running the British Coming Camp here, I always had a bunch of high schoolers. I would use the high school soccer teams as a source for counsellors, and the counsellors, the coaches coach soccer, and then the counsellors help the kids with just whatever, the little ones going to the bathroom or something, or whatever they may need. But it was wonderful, and I always made a point of having counsellors from the various high schools, so it didn't become like a niche thing. So back to this to the USUC thing. So every year, so on Wednesday night, like tomorrow night, right, we have a soccer game, right, which is the British coaches versus one of the local teams. That's always a good time. And are you playing, or are you just going to watch this year?
I was hoping to play, but I've hurt my knee trying to play.
Oh, really?
Back in England, so I'm out. I'm injured.
And as you know,
Davey will be playing.
Oh, good. And my son Liam broke his leg a couple of days ago, so he's out. But you're going to play?
I'm going to play, hopefully, if Heskey picks us. You never know.
He scored last year.
Never know.
That's
so
right, I
we'll
think I
see.
remember that.
Yeah. Well, apparently, I've heard.
No, we've heard.
Yeah.
It was only 40-yard. It was only a 40-yard chip with the keeper, but we don't want to
40-yard chip.
We don't want to talk about it too much.
Yeah. You're
Back
right.
in the day, we used to play Seacoast, and quite good teams,
Right,
and it was tough.
We get some obviously through your son.
Yeah.
You get some high school guys down, and
there's
and quite a lot of them come through the camp. So it's really good to see some of them, and they
I know that some of the and it's boys and girls
It
from
is, yeah.
some of the soccer teams are going to come tomorrow night and do that, and and not that I want to embarrass you or my son, but I have to say here on TV for people who may not know. So my son did go with another friend from the former goalkeeper Aidan Ryan from the Central High School, and they're both in college now, but they went over to Newcastle this for New Year's, or just after New Year's, and you guys looked after them and actually brought them to a Newcastle United game, and they had a great time. So I want to hear in front of everybody say thank you very much. It meant a lot to us and a lot to them, and it was a memory of a lifetime.
Very welcome, Jim.
Yeah.
No, it was great. It was great. The Newcastle Swansea game. And, because obviously I've been with Liam to the MLS over here. We've gone to see the Revolution. Obviously, it's quite a different experience going into an English ground, and they were great. It
was good.
It was a pleasure.
Well, and it's part of the USUC thing, this connection, because we talked about, the people who have come over here as coaches and ended up, teaching in Bedford, teaching in Goffstown. There's a guy who came over here who's up in Montreal, Andy Walker, who married a girl from a part of the Quebecois from Quebec, and has lived up there for many years. And just recently, we have Grant Smith, who's married to the girl Clardy, Lindsay Clardy. And they just had a baby, so we have like a US-UK baby as a result of all of this.
Right.
Not the first, because the other generation has had him as well. But so back to and then so we have this game that happens on Wednesday night. But then there's the golf tournament. It gets very competitive.
It
So
does.
there's every year, right, every 4 years you get the Olympics. Every 4 years you get the World Cup. Every 4 years you get the European Cup. But every year we get USUC.
USUC Cup.
And if you haven't seen it, you haven't lived. Basically, you haven't had the full experience. So USUC is on every year in the summertime. These guys and the rest of the coaches take us on, not just in soccer, but we do golf, tennis, And then there's a competition about it's called a boat race, and it's drinking, imbibing liquids, and you have to see, it's like a relay, and each person gets only one drink, of course, but there's a group of 10, and it's a race. The first person has to finish their drink before the second person can start, and whoever gets to the end first wins. So that's the boat race, which is held late night, and everybody's thirsty because it's after the day, a whole day of golf.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, for years, as I understand it, the US won the USOC golf tournament every year.
I wouldn't
And
say every year,
recent-
Jim.
in many years, or at
Quite-
least for the
yeah,
in
okay.
recent years.
Go on
Then
then.
the last couple of years,
We're
at
back.
least,
We're back.
you're back with a bang.
Yeah. Last year went to a put-off.
Oh, it
So
did?
the score was tied. So obviously it's like a Ryder Cup style tournament, and
Right.
it was tied. So we were all round for a put-off. And
So the initial idea was the coaches that came out played against the host family.
Right.
So
Oh.
the guys would get sort of be paired off, and then we're playing 4 balls and the Ryder Cup basically.
Right,
But it's
right.
morphed into something bigger now, and so this day has become an event, and
Right.
it's really quite exciting.
Yeah, we start with like there's a breakfast at somebody's house, or something to eat, something to drink, and
Yeah.
then there's a day of golf.
Yeah.
And a lot of fun is had on the golf course. And then from there to the boat race that happens in the afternoon, and then it doesn't stop there because it's not a one-day event. This is not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, there's an endurance element to this because anybody can be good for a half a day,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To keep it up all
full
day.
weekend, full weekend.
A full weekend because we go to tennis after that.
That's right.
And we should actually include like something in when we have our lobster, wherever we have on the Saturday, Sunday afternoon, there should be some competition.
I don't know, we're all getting a bit older. USUP bingo, something
USUP
like
bingo.
that. We're getting older.
Those days are
Something like cream puff
House.
toss or something.
Those
but
days-
even certain people who have never played golf have taken up golf.
Yeah.
Somebody such as Phil Jennis, who's a local around here,
Right.
has taken up golf just to be part of it,
Right.
which makes it more.
And when you mentioned Phil Jennis, and we're like, we won't libel anybody because we might mention a few people, but Phil Jennis, the Jennises, and the Scalingis are two families here in Manchester who have been at the heart of this always, who live in the North End, and the Jennises and Scalingis were involved back in the day, and many years after their kids have gone off and through college and are long gone, they're still involved, and people go swimming.
We're lucky enough, obviously, Kathy and Alan Scalingi house us. They
Yeah,
host us,
yeah.
and we're very lucky and
To have them, right.
absolutely.
Graham stays with the Genesis, so
Yes,
it's good
so-
bonding.
Yeah, they've pulled the short straw. They got Heskey. So that whole thing, the other thing that happens, a guy who comes out once every year is the great Abdul. Not everybody in Manchester knows who Abdul is.
Unfortunately,
But if you're out very late at night and you happen to be at one of the bars on Elm Street, especially one that does karaoke, like McGarvey's, for instance, late night on Saturday night or on Friday night, you might find that it has to be always late. It's like Cinderella. He's never seen before midnight,
That's usually
but he
the
does show up. And the great Abdul, well known to Phil Jennis. I don't know how close he is to Phil Jennis, but I've actually never seen. Some people say it might be the same guy.
Yeah.
I've never seen both of them in the same room at the same time, so I don't know. I have my suspicions.
There's definitely
He looks like him for sure. But the great Abdul comes out late night, and that's just one of the many examples of the fun things that can happen
Yeah.
when you're here for.
You'll
for
generally
yourself.
hear Neil Diamond's
Oh, yeah.
song at that time of night.
Oh yeah, it's touching. You think they're at a Red Sox game?
Yeah, well.
Oh no, Sweet Caroline, right?
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
one.
Sweet
That's the
Caroline.
one.
Good times. Never
For those of you
seemed so
expecting
good.
us to sing this by the end of the show, that's not going to happen. If you'd like to call in, I know where we are. Time? Do you have what time are we got right there? On time.
38. So
6:38.
6:38.
So if you still have plenty of time to call in, then the call-in number is 640-3091, and you can ask me a question, or you can talk to Davy Lee or Chris Whitehouse, and we'll combine our massive brains together and see if we can come up with some kind of reasonable response to your questions. Since we're here, since the program is education, and normally I told you off air before you came on, we're normally here talking about education and the challenges to education in a city like
Yeah.
Manchester, and they go on and on and on, and there's a constant tension or there's a rising tension in the United States about adequate funding for public schools,
Yeah.
and a thing called a parent's choice, which is something they know to talk about in the UK, or in England at least. And here, so we've seen, quasi public-private schools, or schools that are like separate academies, and
Yeah.
where are things with that in England? I mean, is the public school system sound, well funded, and everything's running okay, or is it being chipped at around the edges?
I think at the minute it's been chipped at a lot. Funding has completely changed. There was a new funding formula brought out gradually from 2010 when there was a change in government, and slowly that's really hurt a number of public schools. You know what we
Right.
work in with, which are obviously through the local authority and the councils funded that way. And there's been massive cuts in relation to the funding formula for those schools. You talked about academies. That sort of idea of an academy has started to spring up quite a lot. Multi-academy trusts have started to grow. That's caused problems for schools that have transitioned, because things have changed in relation to how schools are ran. And then private schools, in our local area there was a private school which actually changed and became an academy, and that really hurt our local area because we went from 12 high schools to 13. Well, it was at a time where it was quite a low birth period, so
Right.
schools started losing students, which meant funding went down, and sadly jobs started to be lost. So it's not been a great, certainly 5-6 year period,
Right.
certainly from our point of view, probably in the northeast.
Right, right.
but-
I mean, it did not, luckily, I did look at some statistics, and very few, because I'm not a statistics kind of guy. But I just wanted to see where things were, and the UK, which I find is strange, because it's the English and Welsh school systems are the same, and then Scotland separate, or is Wales separate too?
Wales, in theory, there's similarities, but,
Okay.
but Wales has a different national curriculum and
okay.
things like that. So.
Yeah, this was a figure for the UK, right?
Yeah.
Look at it, and it
Yeah.
was the top 40 countries, and the UK came in like in somewhere in the 5 and 4 and 6 sort of
Yeah.
number internationally. So that's like, but this was all schools up through,
Yeah.
like across all schools everywhere. So that they're obviously still turning out, some great. I was delighted to see Ireland came in 9th. I would have been happier with 7th, 6th, 4th, 3rd, or 1st, but 9th is not bad. But we have the problem, the issue as things run in the United States is that schools are locally funded.
Yeah.
So in the state of New Hampshire, which is one of the least populated states in the Union, there's a huge disparity in expenditure per pupil between one town and another. So basically, if you live in a town where property prices are higher,
Yeah.
then generally speaking, those towns spend more on their kids' education than the towns where property prices are lower, because everything goes back to property taxes. So one of the terrible, and I know we don't want to, and I'm not going to invite you in to sort of talk about our politics here, etc. But but the way in which we organise ourselves, I've said before, if you take a map of New Hampshire and you mapped out the towns by income level, and then you were to map out the expenditures per student, they would match each other,
Yeah.
right? And of course, and then directly related that would be academic outcomes. And there are those people who they probably don't think they're being disingenuous. I think they were asking legitimate questions about, well, why should we put more money against schools that are not producing and all this stuff? But,
Yeah.
if you were starting on an even playing field, then
Yeah.
those questions would be. So, but am I right in thinking in England, like, how does the funding model work? Is it the same, does a kid in Newcastle get roughly, in second grade, get roughly the same amount of resources and curriculum as a kid in Hampshire?
There's a tendency for some of the schools that aren't producing the better results to get more money thrown at them, and the schools creating the best results in the area are left alone a little more, so the funding doesn't necessarily go to the better schools around our area especially. So these schools that don't create or don't perform to the higher levels are boosted with all this funding, and our schools do quite well.
Right.
We're the ones that miss out a little bit on that.
Right. So, I mean, that would be like, and I would be thinking that, where the greatest need is where the funds should flow, right? So, like, where we have, my problem with the disparities here is that we already see, if you're in a school where the kids are getting, 3 square meals a day, where there's a unitary family, however you want to describe that today, whether it's, whatever it is, but it's an intact family, and it's stable, and it doesn't have to be rich or well-to-do, just simply stable.
Yeah.
If you're teaching a bunch of kids like that, then the resources you need are
Great.
not as great as they are for a kid when you've got kids coming in who haven't been fed properly, have had no proper place to do their homework, and I like the idea, at least in England. I'm glad to hear what you said, but because it doesn't actually, it happens here with regard to special education, so kids with special needs, and there's a growing number of special needs kids all the time.
Yeah.
But-
We have that, and that's a separate funding. We have also pupil premium, which is those pupils you've just mentioned, those kids who maybe don't have a structured home life, or they do have certain less opportunities at home outside of the school environment. So we get a big pot of money for the pupil premium.
Oh, good,
And
right.
So then we've both done this in our separate schools. Use that money to take these kids on different vocational opportunities, and maybe get some sort of certificates or awards from that. And we've actually used Newcastle United, because they run a good youth development program, Newcastle Academy, and we've got liaised with them, and we use this money to give those kids, and they gain they gain qualifications out of it.
What about another thing that we've seen here, and just here in this city? I mean, we have a school called, so we have 3 high schools, well, really now 4, right? So we had 3 standard high schools.
Yeah.
Manchester Central, Manchester West, and Memorial. Manchester Central is the oldest public high school in the state of New Hampshire. It's around since 1847 or something. But these schools were joined about, I'm guessing, and people will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last 5 or 6 years, or a little longer perhaps, but as a high school in the last 4 years or so, by Manchester School of Technology, which was the old vocational school sort of model, right, where kids sort of went there, there was a kind of a, I don't know if stigma is the right word, but it was like, you're not like you. I don't know. I don't want to say the words like you're not smart enough. You're just going to go over there and play and do woodwork or something, right? And Manchester has sort of taken that model, and I think a lot. While I often argue with the school board about what it does and what it doesn't do, but in this case, the creating Manchester School of Technology, where kids now get the full spectrum of education, math and history and science and all that stuff, but they also have the advantage of doing, computer science, mechanics. They do hairdressing, they do baby, they do all kinds of stuff. So there's a movement in the United States to sort of move kids to sort of career ready, as opposed to college ready.
That's what it has to be, because I firmly believe every single student comes out with a piece of paper that has numbers, grades, whatever on. Okay, every single student comes out with that. As a school, we have to be responsible for not only providing that education, but also providing opportunities to create well-rounded individuals with the skills to then go on to the next step, which is to secure a job, to secure further education, whatever that may be.
Right.
So we have to, you talk about people, premium students, disaffected, vulnerable students, things like that. These vocational subjects are so important, and certainly in England it's a period where they've been discredited somewhat, and we're kind of going backwards.
Right.
So it's all about, and me and Chris have done it in our schools, engaging these students in the best possible opportunities we can, so that they get a love and are enthused for learning in whatever area that may be. They might not like math, they might not like English, but they might actually like building things.
Yeah,
And that's what it's about, tapping in and
And
helping.
in England, schooling is compulsory till 16, but
Right.
then having an education is compulsory till 18. So once they get to 16, they make that choice. Do they go academically for the next 2 years, or do they go vocational? So the colleges, or vocational colleges especially, are trying to get the kids to go to them. That'll enable the kids to move on to career paths, if you like, or jobs, really.
Yeah.
Where the academic kids usually take care of themselves, So these kids need that opportunity from post 16.
Right. We're going to go to another call here. Hi, caller. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes, I was wondering if the gentleman could sing a song live on the air.
I think they might try if you ask them nicely. What would you like to hear?
What would we like to hear? Hey, Aquila.
Hey, Aquila. Yeah, I think we'll do that.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. All right.
Lovely show.
would-
Long-time viewer. Thank you.
Thank you. All
We
right.
can finish the show with that.
So we'll I think we'll finish the show with that. You got to remember to do it though, because we're going to do it.
Give
Hey,
us his name.
yeah. We'll find out who that was. There will be a trace on that call, sir, whoever you are. Disguised the voice very well. It was no way it was Heskey, because he doesn't. He's never going to sound like that.
No.
Plus, he wouldn't have been able to restrain himself. So. So Hey Aquila is a song that every year at camp, generations of kids in Manchester have learned this song, which is like, it reminds me almost of like the haka, what the New
Yeah.
Zealand rugby team does. So we'll do Hey Aquila
Yep.
to, if Brendan gives us a minute countdown at the end or something.
It enables the sun to shine for the week. That's what we
That's
do.
right. Yeah,
It
yeah.
keeps the rains away.
Yeah. It brings that's what it is. They
is.
sing it every morning.
Yeah.
That's what I'd forgotten that. Right? The kids
All the
sing it
kids.
every morning.
Yeah.
And the counselors and the coaches, and it's to make sure the sun shines all day.
I have a song on every morning, song at the end of camp every day. And
Right.
Hey Aquila is the Monday morning song to keep the rain away for the week.
That's
Absolutely.
part of our remit. So that you mentioned it earlier, making sure that these kids have such a good time as
Yeah.
well as learn skills.
Right.
So when they relate football, what's that again? Or soccer, what's that
Yes.
again? Oh, I had a great time.
I had a
Yeah.
great time.
So-
And that's what it's all about,
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't, one of the pities that we have in the United States is that fewer and fewer kids. So I talked about sports programs in high schools and other
Yeah.
schools, and they're available. But in a school with like 1,500 high schoolers, right, and it has a basketball program for boys and for girls, because of Title IX, which we could talk about sometime, the resources have to be gender-wise.
Yeah.
You have to fund both genders equally. But still, you have 5 kids, on 10 kids on a basketball team
Yeah.
out of a 2,000 population.
Yeah.
And then there's a junior varsity team, another 10, and if there's a freshman. So it's 30 kids. Like during that season, there's 30 kids. What do the other, if there's 1,500 kids, what do the other 1,470? See, I'm a math freak too. I did that there. That was like,
Did well there.
yeah, that's called subtraction. I did that in 12th grade because it took me anyway. So what happens actually is, and I had numbers for this, but I'm not prepared to in this show. But the vast majority, something like 85% or 80% of kids in the United States have stopped playing organized sports by the time they get to 14 or in their 14th year.
We've got that problem in Newcastle. There was a study done just actually before we came out, and it was shown that Newcastle has for young children quite a big obesity problem. You brought it up earlier, where they're sitting on the sofa playing the video games, and schools do their best. And obviously working with Chris, he does so many things in his school: basketball, table tennis, football. So many opportunities. We do it in our school: football, rugby, everything. And it's there for the students, and again we need to just engage them and get them in to do that, and I'm sure you do the same over here.
We do. The problem is if the public schools are not doing it, and I know it's tough, and as taxpayers, people paying their property taxes, it's like how many problems do you want us, the property owners, to solve?
Yeah.
And it's that's just a New Hampshire thing. I mean, most states have income taxes and or sales taxes or flat taxes or something. We I think sadly, and not everybody would agree with that. And most people are probably screaming at their TV right now, but property owners get to fund everything. But you have a problem, you have to find a way of solving it. One of the things that has happened is like local leagues, like Manchester North Soccer League or Manchester West and the others. We've seen it happen very recently in Manchester North with regard to baseball, where the baseball league didn't have enough players to continue.
Okay.
So it's been declining over time, and they joined up with Hooksett. And now there's a strong league with the town right next to it, and it's the Hooksett Manchester North baseball. But if you go to these, you can go to baseball teams that are, for profit. They cost quite a bit to join and play, and parents will chase that. So you can go to like a field, somewhere that's like a half an hour drive from Manchester, and you drive over there, and half the people are standing there. They've all paid, and I don't want to single out baseball, because baseball is not the most expensive sport, but it happens in soccer. We have these soccer, groups, and people are paying $1,500, $2,000 a year, or sometimes less, $1,200, whatever. But it's all, and and so this is, one of the things that's happening here is that the opportunity for like what would have been when I was back home, we would have called them street leagues.
Yep.
They're sort of disappearing because there's professional people
Yeah.
coming in, and I mean, are there still kids? I'd love to hear that there are kids still playing soccer on a Saturday morning on the greens outside the house in Newcastle, like pickup games, or is it all like parents driving them
I would
to?
say
Yeah.
it's more parents driving them, and
Yeah.
we call them boys clubs now, and the teams are so popular with the youngsters because they do pay the money.
Right.
So then they get the strips, they get the training gear, they have the decentish pitches and the equipment
Right.
and facilities to go with it. So they feel like they're part of something more
Right.
exciting or more important than maybe school football or maybe
Yeah.
the pickup games that.
And
that
there's
we
no
talk about.
there's no doubt that for the percentage of players, you go up to like the pyramid shaped thing, the kids at the top, it's a great thing, and the ones that, like I'll tell you right today, there's a team from Bedford. Well, it's based out of Bedford, GPS in Bedford, but there are kids from Manchester on that team. It's from around the area. GPS in Bedford, they're 2000 team, so kids born in the year 2000. They're actually, I was looking at a piece of video on YouTube or on Twitter or something earlier on. They were on the bus on their way to play. Who were they going to play? Not Bilbao. Atletico Madrid or something. They're in Villarreal.
Yeah.
So they're in southern Spain.
Yeah.
So they were in the Bernabeu the day before yesterday. Now this
Fantastic.
team from Greater Manchester, based out of Bedford, actually, and there's a guy by the name of John Price who's from Liverpool, who
Pricey, I know
big,
Pricey.
Pricey. They won the national championship as the whatever that is, whatever it is, so 80 U17 or something.
Yeah.
But they were over in Europe right now, playing top level teams
Fantastic.
in Europe. So that's the upside of it,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
I wish that the kind of rising tide would lift all boats. But it's wonderful to see. There's a girl from New Hampshire, from Milford, who's actually about to break into the women's national team.
Yeah.
And then only like you put that in context that like New Hampshire is so small. Like the population of Manchester is like a half-sized city in Texas. So that when Pricey, those guys went out and beat teams from California and from Texas, etc. So it's great to see that.
Yeah.
That's the upside of it. So here we guys, we've about 2 minutes left. Believe it or not, we could ask them for another hour, but they won't say yes.
No.
So
Probably sick of us.
so yeah. Well, we're going to end up. We're going to have to
Heads
end up
up
with a
with the
song. So
song.
we'll get a heads up when there's a minute to go, and we'll do
Yeah.
the song. But anything you want to share, Davey or Chris, before as we're about to depart, or
But not particularly, but in terms of thanks to you, but also I guess the local community who we work with and get to spend our summer with, and all of the children we've worked with
people
over
of
the years.
Manchester,
Yeah,
really,
it's
yeah,
just
the people of
it's
Manchester.
absolutely great, and we love it, and we keep coming back because it is so special to us. So.
well, thank you for saying that. And we there's so many things we could have covered here, but the number of people from Manchester who we mentioned about my son. I hate to be. We don't usually talk about I don't like sentences starting with I when I'm doing this show. I'm not afraid of using them other times, but just with these, I don't want them to find out what I really like.
Yeah.
So, but it isn't just the case of those boys who went over young men who went over this year, but the number of people from Manchester. I know people who were over like visiting with Heskey and Graham Hesketh. And a visit with other people, and they go into Europe. They stop off in England or something. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, this is
Yeah.
like dropping a pebble in a pool of water, and it just the
And that's what
waves
it's all
just
about.
keep. It is.
You
It
forge
is.
relationships,
Absolutely.
and you've got them for life.
See, like I thought Newcastle was an awful place, and I met you guys, and it took me a while.
best city in the world, Jim.
Took me a while to come up. Well, I did start in Yorkshire. Remember, I was a Leeds
That's-
United supporter back in the day.
Won't hold that
So
against you.
you only drive me a few miles towards the coast a little bit. You know what I mean? So, it's wonderful to have you here. It's been a great experience. I would say to people, you can go to Manchester North Soccer League anytime. You can sign up still now for the fall season, which starts at the end of August, first week of September.
Believe we've
Camp is on right now.
And we're going to do another one next week
Next
as well.
week.
Another one next week as
people
well.
can still
So you
sign
can
up.
still
Yeah.
MNSL.org. We got to finish with the song. Are you ready?
Are you leading?
Yeah. All right. So what do we start?
Do you want me to
Clear your throat.
Hey, Aquila. Hey, Aquila.
Riki tiki tumba.
Ricky Tiki Tumba.
Massa massa massa.
Massa, massa, massa.
Manawe manawo manawe.
Hey, man away, man away, man away.
A little louder.
A little louder.
Hey, Aquila.
Hey, Aquila.
Riki tiki tumba.
Ricky Tiki Tumba.
Massa, massa, massa.
Massa, massa, massa.
Hey, man away, man away, man away.
Hey, man away, man away, man away.
Great job. Thank you, guys.